Hi, I'm Mary Weigel, and I'm here with longtime Nashville resident Nelson Turner. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
Thank you very much, Mary, for inviting me to tell this story.
I understand that you have a great story about visiting the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, I call this story The Day I Met the King of Country Music. And it was at the Grand Ole Opry House. So it was several years ago, in 1992, when I lived here in Nashville, although I grew up in Nashville. I was born in Nashville and grew up in a suburb of Nashville in Madison, Tennessee. And so I was around and growing up in the early years of the explosion of country music. Our little town had a radio station, WENO, that was a country station, and we listened to the local information and the country music often in our home. And so I grew up with country music. But in 1992, in early spring of 1992, I was working as a church music director, as a minister of music and youth. I worked with the youth program, and I was getting to know one of the youth at the youth group, and he, by the way, mentioned that his grandmother was the lead dancer in the Grand Ole Opry square dance group. And if I ever wanted to go to the Grand Ole Opry, my grandma, he said, would get us in. And so I took him up on that offer. In fact, I took someone living with us, a French foreign exchange student was living with us, and so I just got my youth group member to ask his grandma and include our name on the list at the security guard at the door. And so we went in the back door of the Grand Ole Opry House and told him our name, and our name was on there, and we went right in the backstage of the Grand Ole Opry. Enjoyed the show in the audience section that sat at that time sat behind the performers in the front of the stage. There was a section backstage on the stage, but behind the performers where you could sit and watch the show. And so we were, at those days before 9/11, free to walk around the dressing rooms and the green room backstage of the Grand Ole Opry. And several of them dressing rooms have names. They're sort of dedicated to that performer. And we came by the dressing room of Roy Acuff. And of course, I was flabbergasted at being that close to a star. And his door was open. Mr. Acuff had already come into the Opera House, and he was getting makeup, and they were fooling around with him. He was sitting in the chair, and he motioned for us to come on in. And so my French friend and I went in, and it would do nothing for my French friend to get a picture with a king of country music. And so he knelt down by Mr. Acuff's chair, and I took his picture. And will always remember that time. And I got a chance to speak to Mr. Acuff. He, you know, he had done this show so much that I assume he needed very little rehearsal for whatever he was going to do on stage later. And so I asked him, "Hey, Mr. Acuff, are you going to sing The Great Speckled Bird?" He said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'm not going to do The Great Speckled Bird. And I forgot what he actually ended up doing, maybe Orange Blossom Special or something like that, that he's known for. But that was a great highlight for me growing up in country music and knowing who the Stars was and getting into the Grand Ole Opry House and meeting the king of country music. It was quite a wonderful and memorable occasion for me at that time.
Sounds like an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it.